In November 2017, I got an email from one of our Instagram and Facebook followers. He's a sales manager at the largest Boston whaler dealer in the state of Texas. He told me about this client's boat that came off his boat lift during Hurricane Harvey, washed up the river like 2.5 miles, and came to rest in someone's backyard. I couldn't help to think back on Superstorm Sandy when the same scenario happened to this 39 Midnight Express that we ended up repairing. Although a couple of fiberglass shops down in Texas deemed the boat unrepairable, the client asked me to come down to Texas and check the boat out and see if it could be fixed. I forgot to tell you, the boat is a brand new 2016, well, new at the time, $1.3 million 42-foot Outrage, the most expensive Boston whaler to date. So I flew down to Texas and spent the day with Mike and Mark from Sail and Ski, evaluating the damage to the boat. I was finally able to see the boat up close and personal and the actual damage this hurricane did to this Outrage. Well, after spending a couple hours literally doing the repair process almost in my head, I made arrangements to have the boat transported up to Massachusetts. The boat arrived up here, I think it was the week of Christmas. Well, forget Christmas. Try to get any boatyard to do anything in New England in December, January, and February, no less March, it's not gonna happen. So we were a little challenged as far as making arrangements to have the boat lifted off the flatbed that it was transported here. The boys from the North Shore showed up with some big pieces of equipment that made getting that boat off the flatbed no problem. Well, moving into January after the holiday break, we had one of the most mildest winters in record. So we were able to get Mike from MTA&K and his crew here to soda blast the bottom of the boat. You'll see throughout the many projects on Making It Metan, most start with his services. He and I go back a long way, and he's someone who contributes at the very beginning of Making It Metan.
Basically what we're going to do now is we encapsulated the entire tent so we contain all of the product that we're going to blast off the bottom of the boat. So using baking soda at about 120 psi, we're going to strip the bottom of the boat, keep everything contained, and give us a bottom that's near finished so we can complete it.
The boat rocked on top of the pylons and the rocks for hours, so I really didn't have that good of an idea of the damage to the bottom. There was some gouges and scrapes on the bottom paint, but you really don't know the extent of the damage until you get that bottom paint off. Having the bottom paint removed, it gave us the opportunity really to see the damage done to the bottom of the boat.
Soda blasting helps me as an indicator because it loosens up the gel coat around every fracture. The velocity of the soda, baking soda coming out, it's able to get underneath any of the loose, delaminated gel coat. It's a first indicator of how far the damage spreads out.
Once the soda blasting was completed, we then began dismantling the boat and removing all necessary hardware and accessories in the damaged area, as well as areas we'll need to gain access, such as dismantling the entire interior. We needed to cut out multiple layers of liners to gain access to the inner damage to properly perform the repair. But like all projects, they all start off pretty ugly, and this 420 is no exception. But we're going to take a break. Stay tuned, because when we come back, we're going to start cutting up this $1.3 million boat on the road to Making It Metan. Welcome back to Making It Metan as you follow us through the repair to the Boston Whaler 420 Outrage. Well, speaking of outrages, I join you sitting upon a Metan Classic Collection EP.1, which is based on the original Outrage design by my late friend and mentor, Mr. Bob Doherty. Well, Mr. D, as I would refer to him as. He first designed the Outrage back in 1970, and I can assure you, as I got to know him, I know all the way back then, he was not stopping at 21.
What I told you is that when I did the Whalers and the Everglades, the Edgewater.
Yeah.
I put a flaw in every one of the boats so that when we built the Everglades, it'd be the best.
Awesome. That's awesome. Great line. Great line.
I was glad and proud to see him release his last flagship, the Everglades 43, one-upping Boston Whalers Outrage 420. Well, we left off and I mentioned the guys were removing the hardware and accessories, not only from the repair areas, but also in potential areas where we may have to cut into to gain access to properly repair the vessel. The 420's gunnel has a lot going on. It has mechanical recessed seating, a very elaborate entertainment sound system, as well as these molded fiberglass storage inserts that were methaculated in place, which made their removal very challenging. From the exterior hardware removal, we moved right into the cabin. Although this boat did not get submerged, the interior suffered a good amount of saltwater damage. The water splashed in the ports for hours, exposing the interior hardware to the corrosiveness of salt water, literally making brand new hardware look 20 years old. The factory used this black material to cover up the port boxes, the forward bulkheads, as well as the boxes that covered up the deck supports. Well, this material did not go well with salt water. Not only didn't it hold up, well, it absolutely stunk like worse than any wet dog. After we removed all the loose items to the cabin and the items that were easily disassembled, we moved on to the removal of accessories in the galley area, such as the cabinets, the countertops, microwave, refrigerator, and also stuffed in back of all that cabinetry was that elaborate video entertainment system that ran throughout the entire cabin settee. And speaking of cabinetry and countertops, Boston Whaler never thought of any of this was ever to be removed from this boat. Don't ever underestimate the power of 3M's 5200. Well, as we say up here in Boston, a wicked important part of a job like this is the cataloging of the parts and accessories that we remove from the vessel. We need to make up a list, a factory list, of all the parts and accessories that we would need to get directly from Boston Whaler. And then we needed to make sure the parts that we were going to reuse get put away in a clean and organized manner. So many months from now, when we're reassembling the vessel, everything goes as smooth as possible. Now that the parts have been put away in storage, and I got the list off the Boston Whaler, we need to mask and bag off the sections of the boat to protect it during the repair process. Now at this point, we're ready to cut into the vessel. You'll see and hear me talk about in this video the starboard interior sitting area. That'll be the first area we begin to cut out. This will give us full access to the severely damaged laminate up in the forward bow section of the hull. To do this, we're going to have to cut through two liners. The first liner is the part that runs across the sitting area and ties into the fiberglass molded sink basin. After removing the fiberglass sections of the first liner, we began to cut into the inner liner. This 420 is no different than the 13s of the 1960s. Foam injection with flotation foam between the hull liner and the inner liner. No different than Mr. Fisher did, what, 60 years ago? In this case, that flotation foam saved this boat. Not only did it act as flotation foam, but what it did is it acted as a shock absorber between those pylons and the hull skid. While pounding against it wasn't able to breach the hull. With any other boat, that pylon would have went right through it. Water would have rushed in, and that boat would have sank. Not a Boston Whaler, even at 42 feet. Another similarity between the 420 and the 13, say, of the 1960s, is the use of shear ties. Shear ties are bonding points between those two skins. In this case, the hull skin and the inner liner skin. Well, those bonding points hold the two skins together while the foam is being injected in and around it. You can see that this foam acted at this point as that shock absorber. That the foam is all fractured and cracked, even in some places condensed from the major impact of these pylons. Well, we had to cut all that foam out, not only because it was fractured, but also is going to give us access to the destroyed laminate up on the hull side.
Now that we got our foam all dug out and it gave us access to that inner laminate, well, not only the most obvious, a hole, you can also see how the damage is spread out by the change in the translucent color of the laminate.
Each of those areas are in fact fractured laminate. Even in the chime areas where they're beefed up sections of the hull, even those layers were no challenge of Mother Nature because the pylon went right through it.
Well, when we come back, we're going to be back at Metan in the fiberglass repair shop, where we're going to get into the phases of this repair. Hello, welcome back. We're here at Metan in our fiberglass repair shop, where most of the phases to the 420 repair took place. Throughout the episode, you'll hear me refer to the phases of the project. That's because the repair process is broken down to multiple phases. On repairs like this, we'll be working on multiple phases at a time using 1 or 2 man crews. Which is why at this point, with the interior phase of the repair well underway, having to cut out the sections of the liner and the foam now removed, exposing all the structural damage to the bow section, Joe and Keith teamed up on the exterior starboard hull phase of the repair and began cutting out fiberglass substrate that is so compromised it can't be repaired. However, temporarily fiberglassing some of these areas back together to leave us, like reference lines needed for later fabrication and layup. We did exactly that with the damage up forward. The guys needed something close to the shape of the hull to do their inner structural layup. Some sections are easily determined whether the fiberglass is so fractured it's unrepairable. You can tell those areas where in fact you can stick your hand or even your head in the hole that the damage is caused. After we cut out the obvious areas, we then needed to go investigating. What we began to do is grind out areas of the laminate around the sections that we already cut out and major impact areas. As we bevel ground the laminate back, we're able to see, similar to the inside but a bit different, the translucent changes in the laminate. In this case, staying solid pink, at which point we know we've ground back that laminate to solid substrate for us to bond our repair to. When we got to this point, that is when we figured out our plan of attack would be, the parts that we needed to be fabricated, the process that we were going to use for each area of repair. Keith would continue in the interior, grinding and prepping the inner surfaces of the hull, preparing for the inner layup, while Joey and Gary began fabrication of parts that we would need to recreate an 8 to 10 foot section of the hull to deck joint. When I was younger in the automotive world, we'd be able to call up our local supplier, order up a rear quarter panel of a Mustang, and not need the whole part that goes all the way up to the back deck. We'd cut it out, splice it into place. Well, unfortunately, in the boat industry, you can't just pick up the phone, call your local Boston Whaler dealer, and order up a 20-foot rear quarter of a 42-foot Outrage. In past repairs, we've used sister vessels as plugs, splashed molds of those sections that we need to repair, or we've been able to work directly with manufacturers who helped us in producing parts off of their production molds. With Boston Whaler, they weren't as accommodating, as I completely understand that it would have disrupted their already busy production schedule. In order for us to make new fiberglass parts that are exactly matching to the area that we were replacing, we needed to find, or should I say salvage, any sections of both the hull flange and the deck flange. Sometimes, like on this Grady White repair, we're able to use the opposite side of the boat as a plug to make a mold. In this case, we then flipped the part 180 degrees, cut the cleat detail off, relocate it to the other side, and then we had a part that was an exact replica of the section that we cut out. On the 42 Outrage, we could not do that for a number of reasons. First of which, we couldn't get a full mold of the hull flange, because that was in back of the deck flange. Then, on the deck flange, the entire top of the flange tapered as the boat continued up, which made flipping at 180 degrees not an option. Well, Joe and Gary went out and salvaged themselves a good 3-foot section of both the hull and gunnel flange. All right, so this is part of our hull to deck joint. That's off the top of our coaming. That's the actual hull to deck joint off the hull. 2 areas that we're able to cut out close to 1 piece that will make a couple molds and then parts. We needed to get that hull flange made and in place to reestablish a solid, permanent line to begin to work from. This would help us later with the shear ties we constructed, as well as giving us a line needed to replace the gunnel, which, like our hull, was missing way more than just these flanges. Joe started by taking the salvage sections and filling and repairing any damage and making these plugs perfect, so the parts that we'd be making from them would be just as perfect. He did this by filling the rub rail holes and any chips and gouges. He then gel coated, wet sanded, and polished the plugs so they would produce perfect molds to produce perfect parts. We needed to then take those parts, fiberglass them together, make an 8 to 10 foot section needed for that hull to deck flange. A few days before Joe started to make these replacement parts, he and Keith got together to get that inner hull layup done. They laminated it with 5 layers of 1708 fiberglass and a few layers of 1 ounce mat, with additional layers of tabbing on the locations of the chines and where the replacement shear ties will be. Joe went back to making the flange parts, giving Keith the opportunity to prep grind fiberglass parts on the inner liner. Joe joined Keith again and began glassing the first inner liner back into place. They laminated several layers of 1708 tabbing to the backside of the panels. Keith bevel ground the outside of the joints in preparation of laminating multiple layers of paper cut 1708 tabbing strips. Unfortunately, just when you think we have all the fiberglass work completed on the inner liner, I needed Keith to cut 2 access holes to inject the voided area between our skins with closed cell flotation foam. He then sanded flush the foam, installed and fiberglassed the panels back in place, and man, did he do his fair share of fairing and bodywork. Utilizing multiple crews, shifting our focus 100% to the exterior starboard hull, join us next time as we fill in this huge missing section of the hull and you see Scotty Van Boezelstein pull off some of the most amazing detailed bodywork as he takes us back to old school and recreates 3-4 different hull lines coming in like at 3 or 4 different angles. It's truly amazing to see.
Well, folks, that's it for episode 1. I'm Mike Borelli. Join us on the next episode of Making It Metan.